Go ahead and bring in our special guest. He is a journalist. He also writes with Black Agenda Report. His name is Abayami Azikiwe. He has been here before. Welcome back. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for the invitation again.
So a lot of people, I cannot tell you how many, have reached out to me and have asked me, can you please cover what's happening with Burkina Faso? And from what I've seen so far, it appears that Ibrahim Traore, there is a lot of pushback against him and apparently some calls on his life. Can we start with Ibrahim first, and then we can get into some of the more complexities and talk about what Macron has to do with this as well?
Ibrahim Traore is a phenomenal leader in Africa as well as internationally. He's the second youngest head of state in the world, only next to the Prime Minister of Iceland. He served in the military for many years. Prior to that, he was a part of the National Marxist Student Association in Burkina Faso. In 2022, there were 2 military coups inside the country. The first one he supported, and of course that did not go far enough. And then of course later in 2022, he was selected to head an interim government. He is currently the interim head of state of Burkina Faso, and they are aligned with 2 other landlocked states in the Sahel region of West Africa. That is the Republic of Mali and also the Republic of Niger. They have formed the Alliance of Sahel States, and they've also signed the Leptako-Gourma Agreement, which is the border points of unity between geographically between the 3 countries, the landlocked countries in West Africa. So that gives you a brief overview of what's going on. These are former French colonies. They have asked the French to leave their country in terms of military support and also economic involvement as well. Burkina Faso produces a considerable amount of gold as well as other strategic resources. So it is a country that has enormous wealth. However, at the same time, in contradictory fashion, they're one of the poorest countries in Africa and indeed internationally.
Because France exploits a lot of their resources, correct?
France, the gold mining industry has been under attack, not only in Burkina Faso, but also in Mali. And that is controlled by companies based in the UK, Australia, as well as Canada. So there are entities which have been extracting gold and other important resources out of the country, and they have not been given back the proper compensation for these resources. So nationalization of the gold industry has been announced in Burkina Faso just recently. So we're going to see more and more of this throughout the entire AES states.
And does the United States, well, let's just say the West in particular, they tend to be pretty hostile towards, I would say, African leaders that decide to operate on their own. So for Ibrahim to ask France military to leave his country, which I think is appropriate, I think it's appropriate, but that sends a red flag to the West.
Most definitely. And security is a major concern in Burkina Faso right now. There was just an attempted coup last week. It was announced on the national television network. The security minister made an extended report about efforts that were international, that were designed to overthrow the government that exists now, that's headed by Ibrahim Traore. Also, the head of the United States Africa Command, General Langley, attacked Ibrahim Traore in a congressional hearing, saying that he's utilizing the country's gold resources to enrich himself and to commit fraud, but there's no evidence whatsoever that this is going on. But the fact that AFRICOM today has become a source of criticism, for example, in Niger, they were asked to leave. They had a drone station there, and it was dismantled because of the CNSP government, which is allied with Burkina Faso as well as Mali. So yes, they are quite concerned that this whole movement against France, against the United States, nationalization of resources will spread to other parts of Africa, and it will create a serious problem for the U.S., France, and the other imperialist states.
Let's bring in Emmanuel Macron here, because he has some nerve. I would say this tweet here: Emmanuel Macron, we need to strengthen our friendship with Captain Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, as we convince him to allow our military bases in his country. And I thought this was interesting. Ibrahim's response is, but you're already friends with the US, Britain, Brazil, Canada. Do you have any military bases in those countries? So very, very well said there. Great response. But it's very clear what Macron is trying to do here. And Ibrahim steps up, and I would say is resisting, and is saying, no, you cannot do that. It's our country. It doesn't belong to you. We do not want you here. And my question to you is this: how long before the US government, or the West in general, tries to do what they did to Gaddafi to Ibrahim?
It's already underway. There have been several attempted coups. The fact that Langley mentioned Burkina Faso in this congressional hearing is a clear red flag. I should say white flag in terms of the white-dominated imperialist states that are trying to control Africa, even up to this day. This is clearly a warning to the government of Burkina Faso, to the anti-imperialist movement worldwide, to the Pan-African movement on the continent and internationally, that this country is in the crosshairs of imperialism. They're attempting to do everything they can to undermine and destabilize and even overthrow the government in Burkina Faso and Niger, as well as Mali. So people should be on the alert, and they should try to contradict and combat any hostile propaganda against the Alliance of Sahel states.
And this is what I've explained to my audience time and time again, is that the United States government has a history of destabilizing countries, ruining them, stealing their resources. And the moment that they don't want to play ball, they find a way to dispose of the current leader and install the leader that they want.
Yes. And right next door in 1966, the Republic of Ghana, the first republic headed by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was overthrown by the Central Intelligence Agency, cooperating with other imperialist states. Later, in 1987, Captain Thomas Sankara, right there in Burkina Faso. In fact, under his leadership, the name of the country was changed from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, which means land of the upright people. So this has been done before, and they're going to continue in their attempts to destabilize Africa and at the same time control the resources that are there, because Africa is extremely rich in regard to critical minerals, metals, and other resources that are indispensable to the world capitalist system.
I think that's the thing a lot of people may not be aware of. They think that countries in Africa are just poor. They think all the countries in Africa are what they see on those late night infomercials that says just $1 a month and you can help a kid in Africa. You remember, those late night like infomercials that I used to see like growing up.
Yeah, and they do the same thing for animals. So it's the same type of mentality. You don't know where the money is going, what country it's going to. So it's really a tragedy. It's just a further level of exploitation. Africa is poor and underdeveloped because it has been systematically oppressed and exploited for centuries, going back to the Atlantic slave trade. We could talk about classic colonialism and neo-colonialism since the 1950s and 1960s. And it's still being destabilized. Look at what's going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo, what's happening in the Republic of Sudan, in Somalia, and many other states. There's still contested zones as it relates to the dominance of imperialism. They do not want African states to form alliances with the People's Republic of China, with the Russian Federation, with the Islamic Republic of Iran, or any entity that's anti-imperialist that's operating inside the continent as well as internationally.
It's like you work with the West or you don't work at all.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's so disgusting. I want to show you this as well. This was Ibrahim responding to a pretty nasty statement that Emmanuel Macron made. President Macron insulted Africa, but President Ibrahim Traore came through. Everyone listen to this. Very interesting.
He also insulted all Africans.
I think they forgot to say thank you to us. It's not a big deal. It will come with time.
There is a part that caught my attention where he talked about ingratitude.
Gratitude, I am well aware, is a non-transmissible disease to humans.
He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human in his eyes. I think that if he is not an atheist and he prays, every morning when he wakes up and prays, he should also pray to the Africans. Because it is thanks to our ancestors that there is a France today. He should pray to us.
The nerve of Macron to make that it's disgusting.
It is. And yeah, he's correct that the wealth of the Western European countries and North America is based upon the exploitation of African labor and resources. And that's clearly laid out in Eric Williams' book from way back in 1944, Capitalism and Slavery. He outlines it. All these major industries that became part of the world imperialist system, whether it's banking, shipping, commerce, mass production, steam technology, all have their origins in regard to the exploitation of African labor and resources. So he is correct. They should be thanking us, and they should be paying reparations to African people in Africa and all over the world.
Very well said there. And I want to bring this up because you mentioned banking. From what I understand, Burkina Faso has a public bank.
Yes. And that's part of the process of transitioning, from French dominance. They've also set up a national gold mining corporation as well to try to take control of the mining and the distribution of the resources that are being taken out of the country, and to get adequate remunerations from the profits that are being generated in Burkina Faso. And we've seen a similar situation as well in Niger, as well as Mali.
This is something we've been talking about on the show before about public banking. In the U.S., we have the Bank of North Dakota in North Dakota, which is a public bank, but we've been trying to push this for quite some time. Like, imagine if every state had their own public bank. And for people who don't understand the big difference, North Dakota was able to withstand some of the economic despair during the 2008 housing crisis because they had that public bank. So they didn't have the same type of struggles that other states had in particular. It is really important for, I think, like you were saying, like Burkina Faso to have its own, businesses, banks, et cetera. And it's like, every time I see these countries like proceed to do something like that, here comes the West to say, let us come in and help you and show you how it's done. And then the country is never the same after that.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And this is happening on an international level. The Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus Summit, they have established a new development bank that's headed by the former president of the Republic of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff. And they're trying to counter the type of conditionalities that the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have placed on Africa and other developing countries. This is the key struggle that's taking place right now on an international level. This is why Donald Trump, the current head of state in the United States, is imposing draconian sanctions in the form of tariffs against just about every country in the world. And we see the impact that's having on the domestic economy as well as the international economy. So this is the 100th day of his tenure in office. And what we've seen is uncertainty, and we've seen drastic decline in even the financial markets, and not to mention the other cuts that he's made domestically as well as internationally. So his program is going to be an absolute failure. because you cannot, as the United States, even though they're the leading capitalist country in the world, they have the largest economy in the world, followed directly by the People's Republic of China. He doesn't understand that you cannot live in the world today economically as a nation state on your own. You know, even car production, for example, within those cars, within those vehicles, you have parts that are made in different parts of the world. So if you're going to place tariffs on all these imports, it's going to do nothing except cause inflation and stagnation in the economy. And we already see that happening right now.
Exactly. And a number of people are upset about what's happening with the economy, at least according to the polls. It is that is coming to light, more people being more vocal about that in particular. If we were to think about, a multipolar world, and to me, it would make sense that countries in Africa would say, you know what, I think we might consider aligning with BRICS. To me, that makes sense, because the West, from what I've seen, obviously has not been a friend to those countries, even when they said that they would. The moment that they decide to go down a different path, that's it. Your leader is done. We're installing a Western, puppet. You can just look to Haiti and see different examples of that, and how the U.S. policies and, I would say, intervention in Haiti has destroyed that country. That goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. That didn't start. A lot of people say Bill Clinton. It didn't start with Bill Clinton. It goes all the way back. A lot of it comes from what I refer to as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which basically says that no other country can be more powerful than the United States.
Yeah, the neoconservative view of the world, which has been adopted as well by Democrats. They have that same outlook internationally. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Comecon countries during the late 1980s and early 1990s, that was a dominant view. The whole notion of the end of history, that there would be no more class struggle in the world. This is, absolutely fanciful, people who are articulating these positions. So today, the Trump administration, with his Make America Great Again, domestic as well as foreign policy, will soon find out that U.S. capitalism cannot survive, it cannot thrive in total competition and hostility towards other states and other capitalist entities. For example, Canada, right here on the border with Michigan, and they're the largest trading partner with the United States, yet he has increased levels of hostility towards Canada that are unprecedented. So it makes no sense what he's doing, but I think it's going to create a whole lot of havoc here in the United States.
What do you think? We want to talk about the infrastructure a little bit too, because I saw this as well when it comes to the roads. We're going to bring this up on the screen here really quick here. Also with Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim refused to hire foreign companies, to construct roads. Rather, he purchased all the equipment and used Burkinabe engineers. He trained the Burkinabe on how to operate the machines and gave them the opportunity to build their own country. He is attempting to be constructing 5,000 km of paved roads annually. No foreign funding, just the government of Burkina Faso. And this is what the West does not want.
Exactly. And that is why they have to get proper compensation for their metals and minerals in order to, rechannel those funds back into the national treasury in order to develop the country's infrastructure, roads, schools, healthcare facilities. All of this has to be done in order to build a modern and highly developed state. And that's what's great about what's going on with the Alliance of Sahel States, is that they're coming together, not for the benefit of a few individuals, but for the benefit of their countries, their people. And we're encouraging other countries in the region to join them and build bigger, more united economic and political blocs across the continent. This is the only way imperialism is going to be defeated. It's like what Nkrumah talked about back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. Africa must unite. And those ideas are still very, very strong today. They have resonance today. And despite all the setbacks, despite all the efforts to hold Africa back, these ideas continue to resurface. And this is very, very important.
I think it's interesting, too, that France, if you look at a country like France and you compare it to the United States, people in France have benefits that we don't have here in the U.S. And it's just plain, it's almost like you just want to grab Macron and say, how greedy can you be? Because at the end of the day, like, think about it for a second. Everyone in France has healthcare. Everyone in the U.S. doesn't have healthcare. Right. I mean, from what I understand, they actually get paid maternity leave, like real paid maternity leave. They have real food at their school. Like, when their school lunch looks like it's real food. It's not like the processed crap that we have here in the schools. Remember how the French rose up and protested against Macron when he wanted to increase the retirement age? They were like, oh, hell no. They were like, what are you doing? You know, so it's just like, how greedy can you be? And you would have thought that by now, France wouldn't have to depend on minerals from Burkina Faso, that by now the country would be developed enough that they would be able to take care of their own people without having to rob another country.
Yeah, you would think, but at the same time, their whole wealth, national wealth, is based on the robbing of other states. And they had one of the worst slave systems in the world in San Domingo, which was later known as Haiti. And that's why you had a revolution that began in 1791 and continued for 13 years, led to the establishment of a Black Republic in 1804. But as you mentioned before, the U.S. immediately imposed an embargo on Haiti. And that lasted all the way up to 1862. The time of the Civil War. And the only reason they lifted the embargo during that time period is because they were recruiting our ancestors here in the U.S. to fight in the Civil War to maintain a unified U.S. state. So all these things are very, very important. And France, we have to remember, they still have colonies around the world. In the Caribbean, they have colonies. They also have colonies in the Indian Ocean, like Mayotte, for example. They also have colonies like Martinique in the Caribbean, and they've had rebellions that have taken place there. In the South Pacific as well, there have been rebellions that have taken place in French colonies, which are still there. So they have colonialism as well as neo-colonialism in those within the French sphere of influence. So they're always attempting to dominate their former colonies and also make inroads to other former British colonies as well.
Do you think that Ibrahim's actions can inspire other African leaders to say, that's it, we want out from the West? I think there may have been some fear of that after Gaddafi, after what happened to him. But do you think he could inspire other African leaders to say, you know what, well, actually, we really don't want to work with the United States. Actually, we don't really want to work with France. We don't want to work with Britain. How about you guys just go?
Exactly. And that's what's happening. There's been announcements, for example, in Senegal, which is in the same region, that they want the French military forces to leave. Also in Chad, which was also a very close ally of Paris in Africa. So it's happening already. This is why they're moving as fast as they can to destabilize Burkina Faso and other countries that are part of the Alliance of Sahel states. So this example can be crushed. They did the same thing against Captain Thomas Sankara during the 1980s. He was calling for the refusal of African states to pay these usurious interest-related loans to the IMF and the World Bank. And for that, he was assassinated. And of course, his legacy still remains. But France was definitely behind his overthrow in 1987. But eventually, the people were able to rise up, throw out the people who had staged the coup during the late 1980s. And the country has undergone a series of crises just over the last 3 years. So For the people in Burkina Faso, the main issue right now is a question of national security. That is what's important. And what happened last week is clearly an example of the fact that they have to be concerned about their own internal security against the imperialist interests that are attempting to overthrow them.
Do you think that, so are there people on the inside that maybe imperialists may have gotten to? Do you feel there may be some infiltration?
Of course, they utilize money. They utilize promises of being allied with France and the United States. This is what was reported last week over Burkinabe television. Yes, they will use people internally as well as externally to bring about destabilization, overthrow of the government, and a return to the Western sphere of influence.
Why? Considering everything, the people there can look around and see what's happening, right?
Yes.
Why would someone say, I'm going to turn against the people of Burkina Faso and I'm going to align with the enemy, the person who's trying to control us and steal our resources?
It's unfortunate, but that mentality is out there. It's everywhere. You have internal struggles that take place. There's opportunism. There are promises of great wealth. So all of these things come into play when we look at efforts to destabilize countries in Africa. And this has happened repeatedly, going back to the 1950s, the 1960s. But what's interesting about Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is that prior to 2020, these countries were heavily dependent upon the U.S. Africa Command as well as the French Foreign Legions, under the guise that they were providing weapons and training to combat these jihadi groups, these groups that are aligned with Al-Qaeda as well as the Islamic State. So that was the ruse they were using to train these soldiers, to provide them with arms, and also to engage in joint military maneuvers, which took place on an annual basis. But what the reality is that many people believe the U.S. is actually supporting these jihadist groups. We know, if we look at history, that Al-Qaeda came out of the struggle in Afghanistan against the socialist-oriented government there during the late 1970s and early 1980s. We know that Al-Qaeda was funded and organized by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. The same situation involving the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, the Islamic State of the Levant, Iraq and the Levant, that came out as a result of the U.S. imperialist attempt to consolidate their control over Iraq and also to destabilize and overthrow the government of Syria. So these entities, these so-called jihadist groups, all of their activities are geared towards the murder, the destabilization, and the overthrow of governments which are oriented towards the people. They never have thrown a rock, fired a shot, or anything towards the state of Israel. Never. They never attack the United States. The only people they attack are their own people and people who are enemies of the United States. So this is what people have to keep in mind, that these so-called jihadist groups that are operating in West Africa in the Sahel region, it is suspected that these groups are actually funded by France as well as the United States. We saw what happened in Mali late last year. Ukraine, for example, has supplied weapons to one of the jihadist groups in Mali. This was uncovered, and it caused a rift, a diplomatic row between Mali and the other AES states against Ukraine. So this is clear evidence that U.S. imperialism is behind the destabilization of these groups. And why? Because they're moving closer to the Russian Federation. That is the main reason. So they want to have them out of the way. And Ukraine is a great conduit for funneling funds from the U.S. into Ukraine in order to destabilize these countries. So this is what's going on right now in the Sahel region.
So I sincerely hope everyone heard that. The weapons that have been coming from the United States going to Ukraine Ukraine has been taking some of those weapons and giving them to countries in Africa.
Insurgents in Africa who are fighting against governments that are in power in order to destabilize them and to keep the chaos and the confusion going and to bring about a halt to any type of development efforts. For example, the roads that are being paved, bringing back engineers and technocrats from who have been living abroad, bringing them back and put them to work to develop Burkina Faso and other countries in the region. So yes, the U.S. is definitely involved in destabilizing all of these countries throughout West Africa and other parts of Africa as well.
These are the kind of things that people need to hear. And I want to sound the alarm about this as well. You mentioned Israel. There was a speech that Netanyahu gave, and he said, Africa, we want to come and liberate you too. And I would sound the alarm that anytime you hear another country use that term, liberate, like they're not like people can liberate themselves, right? Like they don't need Israel to come there. That means they want to come there and they want to colonize. They want to come there and they want to take over. It doesn't mean liberate you as though you'll be free. It means they want to come in and they want to occupy, just like they have people in Gaza.
Yeah, and they've done that before. The Suez Canal in 1967, a large part of the Sinai in Egypt in 1967 was taken over by the state of Israel. In 1956, there was a war waged by Britain, France, and the state of Israel against the Egyptian government of President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who nationalized the Suez Canal, which was his right, if it's on Egyptian territory. So these are some of the developments throughout history that indicate clearly that Israel also has designs on several regions of the African continent. If you look at, for example, Yemen in West Asia, it's just right across from the Red Sea from several African states. So the interests of the people of West Asia, for example, Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Oman, etc., are clearly related to the interests of the people of North Africa and the Horn of Africa as well. So the notion that these entities are separate, that developments, for example, in North Africa or East Africa, the Horn of Africa, have nothing to do with West Asia, is a fallacy. They have everything to do with them because the U.S. is very concerned about what the Ansarullah is doing in Yemen in terms of imposing a blockade against the Israeli defense forces and its overall Israeli economy. And this is very important. That's why they're being bombed almost every week now by the Trump administration because they're fighting against U.S. interests in West Asia.
It's so important that when these countries, when they come in, like they also try to, I would say in so many ways, they try to change the culture sometimes like of the people.
They do.
Imagine, and you think about this with the dialect as well, right? Like imagine how Africans in South Africa would speak had it not been for the colonization.
Yes, exactly. And that's another area too that's been targeted for destabilization. We saw the expulsion of the South African ambassador from the United States, the lies that are being perpetuated by Elon Musk and Donald Trump in regard to what's going on in South Africa, saying that the Boers, the so-called Afrikaners, are being exploited, that their land is being expropriated, and that they are undergoing genocide. This is absolutely false, absolutely false. And they're doing this in an effort to rally the whites in South Africa against the government, the national unity government led by the African National Congress. So all over Africa, they're doing what they can to destabilize many of the nation states. Even though Trump pretends like he's never heard of Lesotho, he's never heard of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so on and so forth, but he has emissaries that are assigned to destabilize these countries, just like in the DRC right now. Marco Rubio just had a meeting with the foreign ministers of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo under the guise that they want to see a peace agreement between the two countries. In exchange for that, the U.S. will supply military forces in the Eastern DRC, where you have important critical minerals and metals such as cobalt and many others that are important to the world capitalist system. So the governments there should not, the government of President Felix Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame, they should realize the history of the United States in relationship to Congo and in other parts of Africa, that if they do send military forces there, it will not be in the interest of the African people. It will only be in the interest of the transnational corporations, which have already, for many, many years, well over a century, they've been exploiting the resources of Congo, going all the way back to the 1870s.
Correct. And Israel too. Israel was also involved in the, for people who are not aware, there's mining in the Congo. I would say the main item there is cobalt. So cobalt is used to make the rechargeable batteries that all of us use in some way, shape, form, or another. And Israel was also a part of that worker exploitation. I've seen videos of kids in the Congo, like just working like all these hours to mine this cobalt.
And they can't do that in the U.S. They do have child labor laws in the United States. They have them in Western European countries as well. So they're doing things that they would never do in their own countries, or the countries that they control outright. And that's what's so outrageous about this whole situation. So the Trump administration, even though it lies and says it knows nothing about the Democratic Republic of Congo, it knows nothing about the Kingdom of Lesotho, where Mr. Elon Musk was attempting to get a contract for his internet service, Starlink, there, but they claim they don't know anything about it. It's just so outrageous, the lies that are being told to the people in the United States and internationally on a daily basis. So in the DRC, fighting is going on. There are Rwandan-backed rebels in both North and South Kivu. And right now, the government of President Felix Tshisekedi is trying to negotiate some type of settlement with them. But if they do, they should keep the United States out of that settlement, because it won't be of any benefit to the people of the DRC or to the people of Rwanda.
That's right. And you mentioned Rwanda. I want to remind everybody there was a genocide in Rwanda. And at the time, President Bill Clinton said he said there is no genocide, then later had to come back and apologize and say, correction, there actually is, there was a genocide happening in Rwanda. I mean, I just say that because I just want to remind people, when you hear politicians say there's no genocide in Gaza, Israel's not killing Palestinian civilians, et cetera. We all know this is false, but I just want to remind you that this has happened before, where presidents of the United States said, no, there's no genocide happening, et cetera. And then later on, people find out the truth. Now, unfortunately, back then there was no social media. So we couldn't.
Very little. Internet was in its infancy in terms of a mass phenomena. This was in 1994. And yes, that had a lot to do with it. Also, the fact that the U.S. had troops in Somalia from 92 up to 94, and they had been roundly defeated. That could have been part of the reason why Bill Clinton did not want to declare what was happening in Rwanda as a genocide, because he felt if that was the case, they would have to at least be compelled to engage in some type of military intervention. But instead, what they did, they recruited Rwanda after the genocide was over. After the RPF took power, they recruited them to participate in several military adventures throughout the East Africa region, particularly the later intervention in the DRC, which occurred in 1998, between 1998 and 2003. And the U.S. backed both Uganda and Rwanda in that military intervention, which eventually failed, but it did cause a lot of deaths, destruction, and destabilization in that region.
So if you all know, hopefully this does not happen, but if something happens to Ibrahim, I think you guys will all know where to point your fingers.
Yeah. And April 30th, this coming, actually it's tomorrow, supposed to be international demonstrations in solidarity with the government in Burkina Faso. So people should look out to see if there are any actions in their areas, and if they're not, they could organize one on their own. Doesn't take that much to organize a demonstration or a rally. Few people can do it, and you could utilize social media to build it.
This is true. Abayami, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for the invitation. Keep up the good work.
All right, guys, I hope you liked my guest. He's been on the show before. Abayami, he was recommended there by the wonderful, wonderful Margaret Kimberly. So I'm glad I got a chance to talk about Burkina Faso. I know you guys have been asking me to cover that story. I just had to find a guest to come on that is very knowledgeable about that particular area. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.